With Introduction to Poetry, we are looking at shifts, specifically a shift between stanzas 5 and 6. And I think this is a pretty noticeable poem, and one of the reasons that I selected it. There's a shift in tone and a shift in subject. The tone shift is hopeful, and it sort of transitions to resigned and maybe even a little disappointed. The first few stanzas are about what he wants the students of his poetry class to do, and we see sort of that in the last two stanzas, they are sort of determined and not to do those things. So we really do have a shift in attitude from very hopeful to sort of resigned. We also have a subject shift at the same time, what he wants the students to do versus what the students actually do. Last one out, the first T here at the end of TPCASTT stands for title. So once again, we're going to take a look at the title and sort of reconsider what it means. Think about your first T. Were you right in your predictions? Did you guess properly, or not necessarily properly, because I'm not sure you can guess properly, but did you guess the right thing? And what other meanings might the title have in light of your analysis? You've read the poem and looked at the figurative language and shifts in tone. What does the title of the poem mean now? So if you have no idea what the title means, you need to reread because you are certainly going to be missing something. So for title for Introduction to Poetry, I made several predictions at the beginning, and I think a lot of them were incorrect. Now I think that the poem title refers to an introduction to poetry class and the students in it. And additionally, the title seems to refer to the ideas and ways poetry should be introduced and how they are actually introduced. This idea that he is frustrated with his introduction to poetry because he wants them very much to enjoy poetry, and he just sort of can't communicate how they can do that. Theme is our last T and most certainly the most important. And we all know that theme is a general insight into life conveyed by the author through his or her work and is not a judgment. It's really sort of the lesson that the author wants us to take away. So for finding theme, we should look at all the parts of TPCASTT and sort of string them together. What connections do you notice between all these different literary elements? How does attitude and shifts and the figurative language, how do all these things sort of build towards the theme? Or how does theme emerge through the use of these items? And when we put them all together, what insight are we left with? So ask yourself, what is the poetry trying to say about life? Now, for theme of Introduction to Poetry, I identified the subject matter of how poetry should be read. I have to ask myself, what is the poet saying about how poetry should be read? And ultimately, I think that the theme of the poem is that students should be free to explore poetry and take joy in its use of language. It should not feel as though they need to torture the poem to reveal its meaning. And I'm sorry that gets caught up at the bottom, but it is to torture the poem to reveal its meaning. So in review, make predictions based on the title, paraphrase the poem, determine connotation by searching for literary terms, analyze the speaker's attitude to determine the tone of the poem, search for shifts in time, tone, and speaker, analyze the title again in light of your reading the poem, and determine the theme of the poem based on your analysis to this point. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer them, but I'm hoping this is a better and more effective way of communicating information, and you can use this as we proceed throughout the semester.